it's a story of two Octobers. It's a story of October 1946 and it's the story of October 2021. Two Octobers spread across time. Uh, but in 1946, in Noakhali, in East Bengal, what was then East Bengal, which later became East Pakistan and is now Bangladesh, horrific riots took place, and Hindu men, women, and children were targeted. So, in that space, what is the condition of the Hindu, right? What is Pakistan? We have to if you talk about fundamental, if you have to talk about fundamental, Pakistan, the word Pakistan comes from Pak. Pak is pure. So what is impure? Hindu-ness is impure, right? So the point is that people don't talk about these things in great detail. But what cannot be ignored is the idea of East Pakistan that remained within Bangladesh. It was not snubbed out. Those elements remain. Marichjhapi is one of the worst massacres that happened in independent India, perhaps the biggest in terms of the number of people that were killed and who died during that time period. I have been looking at Bangladesh from a very different, with a very different eye. I want to I want to really understand Bangladesh better. It's a very complex country to understand. Like I said, both realities coexist.
Hi, welcome to the Mohua Show. My name is Mohua Chinappa and I am an author, entrepreneur, and ex-housewife. This podcast is about everything from business to technology to arts to lifestyle, but done and spoken ईमानदारी से. So hi, in today's episode we have with us Deep Haldar, an award-winning journalist, editor and writer renowned for his incisive commentary on South Asian affairs. With a career spanning over 2 decades, Deep's latest book, Being Hindu in Bangladesh, co-authored by Abhishek Biswas, uncovers the nuanced experiences of the Hindu minority community in Bangladesh. So join us today as we delve into Deep's journey and the profound narratives he brings to light. Welcome, Deep, in today's episode.
Thank you, Mohua. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, Deep, you'll have to just tell me your book, Being Hindu in Bangladesh, explores the life of the Hindu minority community in Bangladesh. What inspired you to delve into this topic, and what do you think the readers, from this book is going to take away?
Okay, I think if I have to sum up the book, it's a story of two Octobers. It's a story of October 1946 and it's the story of October 2021. Two Octobers spread across time. Uh, but in 1946, in Noakhali, in East Bengal, what was then East Bengal, which later became East Pakistan and is now Bangladesh, horrific riots took place, and Hindu men, women, and children were targeted, and almost the entire population of Noakhali was forcibly converted, and that was the only way for them to live. There were few survivors. I got a chance to meet one of them, who is sadly no more, but who was the grandmother of the co-writer of this book, Being Hindu in Bangladesh, Smritikana Biswas. So this book is her story. It is also the story and the story of many others as well, of a lady who I happened to meet in October 2022, again just before Durga Puja. Mukta Shaha, who saw with her own eyes her brother getting killed by a Muslim mob right outside her window. Right, so it's the story in a sense of Smritikana Bishwas and Mukta Saha, 1946, 2022, and everything that happened in between, and is also happening as we speak. Why I wrote this book is I have refugee blood in me, like there's refugee blood in my co-author of the book, Abhishek Biswas. My parents hail from what was East Bengal, which after partition of India became East Pakistan and is now Bangladesh. There was a huge exodus of Hindus from that side of the border to this side. Once arbitrary lines divided us into different countries, and the Hindus who stayed behind, It is the book is a story of them, as also it is the story of Hindus who had to leave that place, their birthplace, their home for generations. So I think it's the refugee blood in me, the stories I heard as a child from my parents, and also as a journalist, this constant flow of stories, often often very tragic, of Hindus in Bangladesh that I heard, and then as a journalist that I went and explored. So yeah, that's my reason to write the book, and that's the book in brief. The story of two Octobers.
So you're talking to somebody who also has the same refugee blood. My both my parents are also from erstwhile East Bengal.
Bengal.
So
Yeah.
the launch of your book sparked discussions on the plight of the Hindu minorities in Bangladesh. I think not too many people in uh, you know, uh, mainstream India know about this. And
Right.
so, could you share some insights, into the challenges that they face and the significance of their role, in society? Because I don't think too much is being written about what is happening to the Hindu minorities in Bangladesh.
Right. So it's a layered question, because while in the process of writing the book, exploring Bangladeshi society as I went along, and also I cover Bangladesh for the print. Uh, it depends on what kind of Hindu you are. So there are, of course, shining examples of Hindus who have done very well in Bangladesh. There are Hindus in the Bangladeshi army, in very high ranks, in Bangladeshi police, in administration, in business, the government manufacturing business, which is talked about in a lot, outside. There are Hindus there, as also in other industries. There are pujas, Durga pujas and Saraswati pujas across the length and breadth of Bangladesh, and very big pujas, and you'd think that everything's honky dory. There's a composite culture also which exists till today. However, when you look deeper, and it's not only when the headlines crop up from Bangladesh of anti-Hindu riots and attacks on Hindu temples and Hindu property. If you look deeper, you will see that along with what I just said, that a section of a chunk of of Bangladeshi Hindus who are doing extremely well and are part of the growth story of Bangladesh. There is also somewhere a toning down of Hindu-ness, if I can put it that way. There is a sense that hard religiosity is pushing against this composite culture of Bangladesh, the culture that came to the fore during 1971, when Hindus and Muslims rose above their religious identity to fight back West Pakistan and form a country where people of all faiths can stay together. It was a stated dream of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and the 1971 generation, not just people who participated in the war, but a lot of people uh, who were part of the civil society at that time, believed in this dream. However, there was a parallel reality, the reality of 1947, on the basis of which India and Pakistan became two different countries. People forget that what is now Bangladesh, the same landmass was East Pakistan, right? So there were ideas even in 1971 of a very different kind of geographical space, where which is only for, or primarily for, Muslims. So in that space, what is the condition of the Hindu, right? What is Pakistan? We have to, if you talk about fundamental, if you have to talk about fundamental, Pakistan, the word Pakistan comes from Pak is pure. So what is impure? Hindu-ness is impure, right? So the point is that people don't talk about these things in great detail, but even during and after the 1971 war, there remained elements within Bangladesh that were inimical to the very idea of Bangladesh. It's not just the West Pakistani army that came to suppress the war for Bangladesh, the Mukti Juddho, but within that society, there were elements, the Razakars, the Al Badar Bahini, others, from civil society and from religious denominations, who did not want to separate from West Pakistan. So, parallelly, this other stream remained, and over a period of time, it can be argued that that stream of thought, which does not want a composite culture, has remained within Bangladesh. So yes, on the face of it, and this is also Sheikh Hasina's government stated aim. She says that, and her party says that, religion is individual. Religion is for the individual, but festivity is for everybody. So that may well be the stated aim, and I'm sure the government does its bit to promote that idea. But within Bangladeshi society, there remain elements which pushes back against this idea. And the moment you push back, what is the first thing you push back against? You push back against the Hindu identity, right? Like I said, what is now, if there's spark, if there's pure, what is impure? The Hinduness is impure. The idea of the Hindu is impure. So I think that we don't talk about when we talk about the composite culture. And I write about the composite culture in great detail in the book and even outside in my articles. But what cannot be ignored is the idea of East Pakistan that remained within Bangladesh. It was not snubbed out. Those elements remain. Okay, the Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh, which is the biggest religious religious political formation in Bangladesh, is extremely, it's banned from contesting in elections, but it has reached the farthest corners of Bangladesh. It has really penetrated into the civil society. You can't ignore that. So we talk about problems Hindus face in Bangladesh only when the headlines come to us. Attacks on temples, attacks on life and property, forcible conversion. What we do not address is this other idea of Bangladesh, the idea of East Pakistan, the original idea which remained in Bangladesh's bloodstream.
It's really interesting. Actually, it's my first podcast deep with anyone who's talking about the Noakhali riots because it's something that my late Baba, used to constantly talk about. And my work also as an author has been on this entire space. So it's really, really an honor today to have you with me. So, as a journalist with extensive experience, covering diverse topics, including religion and politics, how do you navigate the complexities of these issues, particularly in context of Bangladesh?
It's a very complex society, it's a very complex subject to cover, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of this side and that side, or the whole political and ideological divide. So it's very nuanced. So for instance, like I said, there are competing ideas of Bangladesh within Bangladesh. And sometimes a mistake that filmmakers, artists, thought leaders from West Bengal, from our side of Bengal in India, West Bengal, do is they go to Bangladesh, they go to these few sanitized spaces in Dhaka, and they think everything is honky dory. Now it's honky dory in those spaces. I would argue that it's even honky dory in the interiors of Bangladesh. I have seen, for instance, since 2022, I have every Durga Puja I have been in Bangladesh, because I find the country fascinating. So I have seen examples of great tolerance and brotherhood. I have seen in the farthest corners of Bangladesh scenes from Durga Puja where a woman clad entirely in burqa is sitting outside a Durga Puja pandal, very casually, very happily looking on at what's happening in the pandal. She may not be participating in the puja, but she's not looking at it with the eye of somebody who has an objection to it, right? But alongside, there might, in the next village or in the next district, there are reports, and sometimes those reports don't even make it to mainline press, of somebody stealthily entering a temple in the middle of the night, breaking the idols to pieces, and thereby disturbing the entire puja proceeding, and those cannot also be ignored. And unless you address the fact that, along with great examples of secularism which continue to the day, there is this constant threat and constant and growing threat of hardline Islam that's pushing against this idea. You won't be able to you won't be able to really report Bangladesh or write on Bangladesh. So yeah, so it's very difficult to navigate, because both are realities. You write about, so for instance, I'll tell you, I did a story for the print on this 400-year-old Kali temple, which was washed away by flood water, by river water. And the Muslims of the village have come together with the Hindus of the village to build a makeshift temple. Now, this is something I saw with my own eyes. I went there, I stayed in the village, I spoke to people, and I spoke to the Hindus of the village, and they said we didn't have the money. They gave us money to build a temple. Now, I can't discount what I wrote, but the moment you put the story out on social media, That many people who say, but what about this, what about that, and those are also true. So the whatabouts are also true, as true. And you say that, okay, for every temple that is built, five are destroyed. Now, there same people perhaps are not going and destroying those five temples, but there are within Bangladesh, and even inside Bangladesh, not just in Dhaka. Great, like I said, great examples of brotherhood. I desist from using the word secularism too much because it's a much abused word, but there are great examples of brotherhood that exist. But parallelly, there is a stream that is pushing against this idea, and I think we need to constantly explore both. We need to look at civil society. We do not just need to hear the Bangladeshi government out. We should, of course, as journalists and thought and public intellectuals, we should, and writers, we should hear what the government has to say and their stated aim of secularism. But we should also look at the constantly examine the churn within Bangladeshi society, which perhaps which is definitely at times anti-India and definitely sometimes anti-Hindu.
Your previous work also, such as Blood Island and Bengal
Yeah,
2021, have delved into very significant events and societal issues. So, how does your approach differ, from writing about historical events compared to contemporary socio-political landscapes? Because what you're talking about right now is something that is very, very politically also motivated at many, many places. All of this happens because there is a vested interest somewhere. And of course, there's a history behind it. There's a
right,
history that many of us can't erase. There's a history of memory, exactly like how you said that you have the blood of a refugee inside you. I too have the blood of a refugee. I feel as strongly about exodus of the Bengalis that I faced in Shillong, as a young girl, and we had, like, there were thousands of Bengalis. We left our properties, our homes, everything, and we had to reboot our life all over again. So, just
right.
explain a little bit about both these books and how do you approach these.
So see, I Marichjhapi is about something that happened more than 4 decades ago. So my process of writing that book was to find out survivors and hear them out, go keep going back to them, because it's very difficult for any survivor to recount a massacre of the scale of Marichjhapi, okay, and been ignored all these years by mainstream writers and journalists, okay, and there was nobody they could tell their stories to. So that process mainly involved seeking them out, gaining their confidence, and going back to them time and again to hear their stories out and to say those stories as honestly as I possibly could without my own interpretation of them. Okay, they were varied stories. The book is, every chapter in the book is somebody's story. So, and they were spread out across many states in India. So I think the idea there was to report as honestly as I possibly could what they had to say. But this book, and it was a traumatic process because Marichjhapi is one of the worst massacres that happened in independent India, perhaps the biggest in terms of the number of people that were killed and who died during that time period, because the left-front government decided that they will be taken away from that island, and they'll be sent back to the Dandakarana area in central India. Now, this book, though, it's a shape shifting, getting new data every day, uh, sometimes several times in the day kind of book. So here my own understanding, my own thoughts kick in, because I'm more attached to this book, in a sense, to the story, not to the book, but to the story, because it's happening in real time and I can see it for myself what's happening. So, for instance, in the process of writing the book, I can actually physically go to a mandir inside Bangladesh that has been ransacked, by an Islamist mob. So, this is not just hearing what people have to say, survivors have to say, but also seeing for myself the threat within Bangladesh. So it's also meeting in real time the survivors of riots, as opposed to people who have survived riots 40 years ago. So the process is more challenging for being Hindu in Bangladesh, because you are also constantly reading newspaper reports. You are seeing how Bangladeshi press is reporting. You are seeing how Indian press is reporting some of the events, and also the chatter on social media, and the views and counter views, and the constant comparison with what's happening to minorities in India. So that's a lot more to navigate. to navigate through. That book is the previous book, Blood Island, was mostly about seeking out survivors of a massacre that happened long ago and listening to them and writing them as faithfully as I could. But this is more real time. The process, because many chapters I had to write and then rewrite because something else had happened. I had to revisit my own assumptions as I went along in the process of writing the book. So that way, and I had a very able co-traveler, Abhishek Biswas, who's a researcher and a professor, and he had just completed his PhD thesis on oral narratives of Dalit partition survivors. So with his entire research and with his experience in talking to survive partition survivors, he joined me in this journey. So my task was made much easier uh, because of him, but it was constantly being updated and with what's happening on a day-to-day basis in Bangladesh.
So you also mentioned the sense of doom that many Hindus, in Bangladesh feel about their future in the country, and
Yeah,
there's right now there's so much that's happening about a pushback, especially with the Indian government also, where anybody from outside cannot really come into India and feel safe in spite of there's so much of religious conversations that we're having around us. There's suddenly a new sense of identity, a new sense of reclaiming a part of our history.
right.
So, how do you think what would be the necessary steps to address, their concerns and ensure their safety and well-being? Because as a minority in Bangladesh, it's not going to be easy. And we know, as I'm a Bengali and you're a Bengali too, we've seen, the leftover trauma among our own parents, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our uncles and aunts, and the diseases that they carried forward, the generational trauma that's also passed on to us, through the
Right.
years. So tell me a little bit about this, Deep. How do you think that this would be addressed? Because as an author, as a writer, you would obviously want to imagine that there would be some step that would help, the minority community in Bangladesh.
Well, like I said, that the Sheikh Hasina government, that is in very friendly terms with the Indian government, is at least their stated aim is secularism, to promote diversity in thought and religious practices, and that has remained the stated aim for her party, Army League. Because if you see the voting pattern during elections in Bangladesh, uh, the large portion of almost in entirety Hindus in Bangladesh vote for Army League. So there might be a lot of anti-incumbency against Sheikh Hasina. This is 15 straight years in power. Uh, you know, but if you ask uh, Hindus in Bangladesh who they will vote for, they say we have no alternative apart from Sheikh Hasina, because the other alternative is complete gloom and doom. One of the years that stand out is 2001, when the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and the Jamaat came to power in Bangladesh, and soon after there were anti-Hindu riots and rapes and forcible conversions that were carried out across the length and breadth of Bangladesh. I had an opportunity to talk to Mohammad Shahabuddin Chuppu, the current president of Bangladesh, who was a judge, and he was part of a judicial committee in 2006 to look into the riots that took place in 2001 when the BNP Jamaat combined came to power. And he said, there were nights where the single woman was raped so many times that she lost her head. And he had to go and record her statement. And there were hundreds of women who were raped in the course of a single night across Bangladesh. So I spoke to a lady called Purnima Rani Sheel, who was only 13 years old in 2001 when she was gang raped by BNP party workers. And she was left to die, but she survived to tell her tale. And I had an opportunity to meet her and to hear her tell her story, horrific as it is. Uh, and there have been, though it can be argued that under the Sheikh Hasina government, that except if you discount 2021, the attacks on Hindus have, at least in the intensity of attacks, have come down. There are sporadic attacks that keep taking place, but I think, like I said, those fissures exist in society, and you have to constantly keep a lookout on what's happening, both from India and from Bangladesh. The Bangladeshi government, I think it's doing its bit. So also the Indian government, you are looking at, but I think a closer look needs to be taken at the civil society, not just at the government to government level. There's great partnership, strategic partnership between India and Bangladesh currently, but there are very serious questions that what after Hasina, what happens when uh, Hasina is no longer the prime minister of Bangladesh. What about the Jamaat Islami's stated aim of Sharia law for Bangladesh? Where do Hindus go then? The Supreme Court of Bangladesh has barred Jamaat from contesting elections, but that's now. What happens if in the future a Jamaat backed government comes into power and the Jamaat wants Sharia law in Bangladesh? Where does the Hindu go then? These are very serious questions which you cannot ignore. So yes, I think the intensity of anti-Hindu attacks might be less as compared to what was a couple of years back, but I think there's a constant need to look at and to observe the churns within civil society of Bangladesh.
Can you just elaborate on the significance, of preserving oral narratives, especially regarding the partition history that remains, a chapter that a lot of people don't talk about, especially this entire, undivided Bengal. So, you and your co-author Abhishek Biswas are actively involved, in archiving these stories. So, could you tell us why is this important for all of us to know?
There's a war on currently over history books. History books are the epicenter of wars currently. There are allegations that history books, the way they are written in the Indian subcontinent, were biased. They were extremely prejudiced in favor of one ideology over other, in favor of one people over other. I think, and government records lie. Let me tell you, government records across states, districts, countries. They constantly lie. They try to show you things are not as bad as they actually is. I think every government does it. So what do you rely upon? When the history of a people has to be told, I believe that it is best to that they are told from the mouths of those who are living it. What oral history tries to do is it tries to go directly to the people and hear the accounts of the history of their history from their mouth. Okay, so I think it's very important to hear those stories. I can have an idea of Bangladesh by reading 10 books, which I did. When I actually went to Bangladesh and when I started speaking to people on the ground, I realized that the reality is far more complex than I sort of than I had believed it to be. Depending on who you read, you might believe that secularism is the reality of Bangladesh and the attacks are a fringe, or you can believe the other way. Both ways are wrong. It's both simultaneously, right? So you have to go there and see what's happening. So like I said, unless you go to I went to this district called Mahura district and I spent my Durga Puja there last October, and I saw, like the story I told you, 400-year-old Kali temple, and I saw Durga Puja happening, and I saw the pandals being put up, and I saw Hindus and Muslims together, in a sense, participating in the festivity, if not in the religious in the religious ceremony, in the festivity. Both communities are participating. I had to see that, right? If I am to make up my mind by reading a book, I may get it wrong. So I think I need to go there, go to Magura district, speak to the Muslim there and the Hindu there, and also to the Muslim and Hindu in the neighborhood village where they might not be celebrating Durga Puja, or where a Durga Puja pandal might have been vandalized. So unless you go to the people and you hear them tell their stories and then record them as honestly as you possibly can without your interpretation, at least in the recording, in the retelling of the stories, I think you don't get history right. So I think what you asked, I think oral history increasingly will become more authentic, and more engaging than history written in some other way, which is often an interpretation of the writer.
You're also a columnist with the print, and as a contributing editor, how do you see the role of journalism in advocating for marginalized communities and, of course, fostering a dialogue on sensitive issues? It is really sensitive to talk on religion and identity, and both are so interlinked with one another. Um, how do you go about this entire thing?
There has been enough and more has been said about the pitfalls of mainstream media. I'm very happy that the print and my editor Shekhar Gupta allows me this space to tell stories the way I want to. They're open to every kind of idea if the idea has merit, and he lets me travel to the furthest corner of Bangladesh and bring back all kinds of stories from there. I write on a variety. I write on, in fact, this morning only I was writing about a Bangladeshi OTT platform, Chorki, which is very famous both in Bangladesh and in West Bengal, and also for Bengalis worldwide. I also can write about temples and riots and whatever I wish to, and forced conversions. So I'm very happy that I get this space, but it's a shrinking space, which is why you see social media, and as problematic as social media sometimes is, often punishing mainstream media for its for its many lapses. I think in terms of telling marginalized stories, the mainstream media needs to do way more, and not just in one particular area, everywhere. I think what has happened is, because of bite journalism and quick takeaways, sometimes we miss the honesty and the sincerity of real stories. We do not we often do our stories sitting in Noida newsrooms, or in headquartered in Delhi. Or even if we go to the spot, we go with a preconceived notion, and we quickly ask questions to people who we know would kind of agree with the answers we want from them. But I think the idea is to not go to a spot with preconceived notions, but to constantly to seek, to search for the truth, and not to decide for yourself beforehand what the truth is. So I think it's stories are very important. Mainstream media of late, I think, because of various pulls and pressures. I was part of the mainstream media not too long ago, but I think mainstream media constantly uh, needs to take a very hard look at itself, and so that the challenges to it are less, because there are so many mediums now. There are podcasts, and there are individual YouTubers who are doing excellent work.
That's the gap that I'm looking at bridging. Deep. I used to be a
Yes,
journalist too, and
yes,
I just felt that there was so much of loss of efficacy, and
yes.
that I felt that these were stories that needed to come out. So
Yeah,
uh,
I mean,
I
we just
completely
need to do
agree
the
with you.
grunt work. We just need to go to the spot, and we need to spend time in talking to people and reporting it as honesty in this mad craze for headlines and quick takeaways and TRPs. We have been missing stories. We have been missing great stories, and I, as a digital journalist now, I see sometimes a story well told performs way better than stories told with a clickbaity headline in mind. I think more of us need to realize that.
So, lastly, what upcoming projects or initiatives that you're currently working on, and themes or stories that you're eager to explore in your future work? Because I need to have a conversation with you post this podcast also.
I'm fascinated with Bangladesh. I write on I the national elections are around the bend, so I am trying to do a few political copies from India as well. But Bangladesh continues to fascinate me. I go there almost every month. I spend a week, 10 days there every month. So I think if I have to take up another writing project, it has to be something around Bangladesh. And I read a book, Declan Walsh's Nine Lives of Pakistan. He was a New York Times Pakistan correspondent before he was kicked out of Pakistan by the ISI. It's a fascinating book. So, a foreigner, a Westerner, goes to Pakistan and examines a country, a culture, and a religiosity so different from his, and the way he has done it. And it gave me quite a few writing tips about how I could have done this book differently. Of course, he had more time. He had 10 years. I had 2.5 years. But the way he has, and without any preconceived notion, without any white man's burden, without any bias, he has actually tried to engage with Pakistani society, very complex Pakistani society. Was an eye opener for me, and since reading the book, I have been looking at Bangladesh from a very different with a very different eye. I want to I want to really understand Bangladesh better. It's a very complex country to understand. Like I said, both realities coexist. So, and you can't suddenly say this is right, that is not right. Both are right. you know so it's this constant duality of Bangladesh that's there in your head when you go and report. And so I think if there has to be any more writing projects, it has to be from Bangladesh.
To you, our dearest listeners, you can find us on your favorite streaming services: Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and of course on all other major streaming services. With loads of love, we are The Mohua Show, where we talk ईमानदारी से.